going to be protecting you, though.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he looks very protective down there.
Oh. Little Pixel Puck is gonna protect me. Surely.
Well, Pixel Pucks will protect Pixel Goblin.
Oh. Okay.
That's how it works.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah. That's logical. All right, let's get started. Oh, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Unnamed Tavern. We are back. We are here with our crew. I'm excited. Are we excited for the news? I don't know. It's the news. It could kind of go either way, but I'm here with our lovely panel. Welcome back. I hope you brought your drinks. I hope you brought your stuff, and I hope that you guys have a good time. Make sure if you have any questions, make sure to tag me in particular. And if you have anything you want us to cover in the future, please make sure to put a comment down below. If you add a link, fantastic. I'll make sure your comment gets put in. And let's introduce our panel. We'll go Maanyaa, then we'll go Landon, then we'll go Dapper. Maanyaa, how you doing? How's your weekend?
My weekend is going great. I did some last-minute research for the topic I'm going to talk about today. I lobbed it on Chesh the last minute, and she has been very kind to let me sneak it in. So, yeah, as everybody knows, I appear on Dubfect Friday with Chesh, and we have a lot of fun there, and a lot of screaming, and a lot of sighs. Yeah, so today will be the same, but the booze gets mixed with it, so you're in for a treat.
Landon, how are you? How's your weekend?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone and latitude. I'm your astronomer and guide to our favorite universe, and I'm having a wonderful weekend. It just started for me, as opposed to some people who've had practice, like Maanyaa, on the weekend. I have today, I'm going to start off with this particular beer, Voodoo Ranger, Atomic Pumpkin. I have no idea what it is, but it was given to me. I hope it's not like pumpkin spice beer, but we'll see. So this is a spicy release. If we go heavily, then I'll go back to the Rainier Lager or the Costa Brown Santa Lucia Highlands Pinot Noir 2019 wine. So it depends on whether we go up or down as to in the alcohol levels, because beer is low alcohol and wine is higher alcohol. I don't mean to tell you about the 100 levels of alcohol, but
I'm just impressed that, oh my god. I'm just
sorry.
God damn it. I'm just impressed that you still have any alcohol left over after Wednesday. So if anybody missed it, me and Dapper and Landon were live for 4 hours watching and drinking, playing a drinking game with the History Channel and Ancient Aliens. I did ask...
So we have three... We went through like 3 segments, right?
We went through 5.
Oh, 5.
Yeah, we went through 5 segments.
Wow.
We also... I did tweet at the History Channel to ask them what an ancient astronaut theorist was. They have not gotten back to me as of yet.
Weird.
Dapper, how are you? How's your weekend? What's going on?
Oh, my weekend's okay. Have a friend I met in the Navy hanging out here for a little while. I, in fact, am pretty much out of booze, unless I just want to just drink brandy, which I don't really right now. So I'm drinking some water.
That's fair.
Doing the responsible thing, staying hydrated.
Yep.
Still hungover.
Basically.
By the way, Dapper, since you doxed your service record, thank you very much for your service. I have been in my work and nuclear stuff been extraordinarily impressed with the Navy's nuclear program, and I don't know if you're involved in it, but all the stuff that's necessary to do some of those.
I was in fact a nuclear electrician.
Oh, very good. Well, yes, I'm extremely impressed. And folks, if you want to have someone run your civilian reactor, get a Navy person, because they know what they're doing.
That is generally true, yeah.
As opposed to, who should you not get to run your nuclear reactor, Landon?
Just some guy.
I would not get. There are certain
an
Russian designers
ancient alien theorist.
I would not have. I would don't ask for Kent Hovind either.
Yeah, no. Now, have we considered turning all of the nuclear power plants just into pyramids? Because
Ooh.
apparently that generates power.
Hmm.
Oh my god, I didn't see that one coming. I was like, what?
In other words, go watch the last thing we did. It's long,
Yes.
but put it on like times 1.5 or something, and just
Average of 21 drinks per episode. It was 105 drink minimum, and we managed to get through it.
I can't believe we got through that. And it was way longer than I initially intended. But that's okay. Anyway, speaking of nuclear reactors, I do believe fusion energy and the breakthroughs in fusion energy are our first topic today. And I think the people who ought to start that is Dapper and Landon. So if you guys want to take it away with what the heck is going on and how fucking impressive that is, I took notes.
Ooh,
Wow.
Dang, Chesh with notes. That's so hot.
So, Dapper, you want to start, or I'll start? Either way.
So, I mean, I'm not an expert on fusion. You know, I worked on fission reactors, which is the only kind of nuclear reactor that's currently like operating at a commercial scale for actual power generation. So, you know, my knowledge of this is somewhat limited, and I will admit that I have traditionally been a bit of a fusion skeptic. Not in the sense that I think it's a bad idea, but that I think that almost everything I've heard about, like, oh, great advancement in fusion power, has been overhyped. And so we're getting another story about a reactor that is allegedly essentially producing more power than it takes to run the reactor. Now, sometimes that's described as like it's outputting more power than is put in. That's technically not true, because that's not how physics works. There's a set amount of energy, and you can't get more out of it than was put in. However, what they mean is the power to run things like the containment fields and, you know, all the keep everything at the right pressure and, you know, basically keep the lights on at the fusion reactor. It's now producing more than that. Now, the thing is, though, I've also heard similar claims before that did not result in any obvious change in the state of fusion power. So I am cautiously optimistic. However, I have said it many times, as have others, fusion is it's only like 30 years away, and it always will be. And I'm not sure that recent announcements are changing that.
So, you know, I think much of what Dapper said is correct. I will take a slightly different approach, and part of it is because I am a fusion expert. I worked multiple years in magnetic fusion energy in the computer center. I worked under a gentleman who was very instrumental in developing uncontrolled fusion. And as such, and I've been also at the facility that is the ignition facility that came into news recently. I think Chesh would probably say that the fusion energy research needs a PR agent.
Oh,
that
boy.
is because they do things perhaps to get funding, perhaps to justify things, and make promises that are akin to Elon Musk level promises.
You know, I thought you were gonna say Elon Musk, but I wasn't 100% sure on that one. There will be a video coming out about that, by the way, from what we talked about last time on the Tavern, so I definitely recommend you check that out, either in full or in the segments that are going to be coming. I'm just waiting to finish setting up my new computer, so please have patience with me. I'm sorry. It's Christmas.
That's fine. But so the joke about fusion being ahead is a PR thing. So let's talk about what actually happened, right? First of all, what the ignition facility is. The ignition facility, the National Ignition Facility, was designed to try and create fusion in small pellets, particularly for understanding the nature of plasma as it's undergoing fusion. Right? Plasma, we know about plasma. You can see it in things like gas that gets excited and creates light and so forth. Fluorescent tubes and
those little balls at the museum where you put your hands on them and then your hair stands up on end, and then you know science.
Yeah.
Hey.
But when when hydrogen starts to fuse, it becomes very weird, and particularly because one of the things that's integrally involved with hydrogen fusing is this thing called quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics, well, I'd have to take you through 100 levels of weirdness just for you to understand what the game of quantum mechanics is about. That being said, what happened, right, in this thing? And the news is correct in that a very careful analysis of the energy necessary to initiate the reaction came out at around 2 megajoules, and reaction came up at just over 3 megajoules. So you might say that the effort to get the reaction started, to cause reaction, the reaction produced 50% more energy, and that is that's a requirement if you're going to have a power plant. You would not want to have a power plant where it takes more power to run the power plant than the power plant yields. That would be you would not have a good time, right?
Bad economics.
You'd be French frying rather than pizza, or is it the other way around? I forget. So the ignition facility achieved this, and one of the things in particular that the ignition facility is very good at is that it's creating. It's relatively simple to set up and modify the experiment parameters, as opposed to things like the tokamaks, giant magnetic donuts, if you will, where the setup is very difficult, and oftentimes you sort of get you don't have much in the way of parameters. You just sort of see what happens. Whereas with the initial facility, they can tweak things, and in particular, the area when I was involved in when the laser was called Shiva. And it was really actually was a nice thing. There was they actually had work with with some physicists from India as well that were involved in that thing, and they had a nice Shiva dancing god thing, in part because that time it was 92 lasers, or was it 96 lasers coming in trying to all focus on one spot where they put a hydrogen pellet. And what
they got paid at least $6,000 in a year.
Yes, I believe some of the people there were paid a living wage even by Canadian standards.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder what it's like to work
but anyway,
for a living wage.
that particular time,
I wouldn't know.
And what they found with fusion research is that, and I could say, is that if you try to brute force hydrogen to fuse, you end up failing, right? So other designs were created, and the current ignition design has a cylinder, if you will. Mm-hmm. This is like the cylinder like this, and what the lasers do is first of all, much more power. And double the laser beams. The laser beams come in on both sides like this. They come in here, and what they do is they strike the inside of the cylinder. So you have a bunch of beams coming in this side and this side, and they're focusing in and striking the inside of the cylinder. And what the inside of the cylinder does is it reacts, sort of detonates, produces an X-ray front, and the X-ray shock crushes a little pellet about half the size of a BB that's centered inside this thing, and the X-rays impinge on it, crush that hydrogen down, and hold it there long enough for not only the pressure and temperature to achieve fusion, but the quantum mechanical effects to start, and they get what they call the nuclear people call it a burn, a good burn. So if you will, it's like they have this match, and when they strike it, they can actually have the match light. And the effort of striking it is only about 66% of the energy comes out when the match lights. Now, would this ignition facility itself produce a commercial reactor? Although some of my laser fusion people would disagree, it's not practical way to do a reactor. But it is very practical in how you and be able to understand how fusion works. And so this particular setup, they have ramped up and increased the efficiency by an order of magnitude, because they're able to learn from the reaction and tweak things. And so in some ways, the value of this system was that they now are able to take a fusion engine and actually go from a starter motor to have the engine turn over and run for a little bit. This is going to give us a really good information about how fusing plasma works, and that will lead us towards a better understanding of how to build the tokamak. And the magnetic donuts are probably by far the more practical design in terms of producing having an actual power plant. But the understanding of how plasma works is you need this smaller scale thing, because it's too difficult to just create these multi-billion-dollar tokamaks and say, they try again, wait a couple of years. This system is going to give us a much better tweaking, and they're not by any means they're not finished with ignition facility, right? They're going to be studying these reactions and pushing the level of how thoroughly the pellet fuses.
That makes sense.
So I would acquire this. I would liken it to say we've had our Kitty Hawk moment, where we had a really good demonstration of powered flight with a human on board. Now, does this mean that next year we're going to be flying to New Zealand from North America? No, right? Commercial airlines and jets and so forth, that's down the road. But we now have a path to get there. So that's, I think, is a significant watershed moment. As to how long it takes, there's still a number of difficult things to go about. But now we can actually experiment with real fusing plasma. Before we had, we could have things stick to each other by slamming in, small bits slamming into an accelerator, or detonating a thermonuclear bomb. But that's considered antisocial. And besides, that kind of uncontrolled fusion didn't give us really a good thing. I think in some ways, fusion research was sort of waylaid by that notion of a sledgehammer, right? The way you get hydrogen to behave is beat it with a bigger hammer, right? No, you got to finesse it, you got to caress it, and so this indirect thing of having halarium hit on the inside to generate X-ray shockwave to crush a thing was a more of finesse style. And so as to the road from having useful fusion reactions to having it being done on a sustained basis, I think that's the next road, which is to get the tokamaks learning from the inertial fusion people how to handle plasma. I know that, for example, ITER, the international tokamak in Europe has had some construction problems. They've had some issues of manufacturing. And I could regard it as good, because they have an opportunity to learn from these experiments and perhaps tweak their design to get a better idea about that's the next level. Create a donut level of plasma that fuses and yields net energy. And then there's an engineering challenge beyond that to build something that's sustainable and understand the power thing. It will be, when fusion occurs, it'll be a really great game changer.
So is this how much of like a breakthrough is this? Is this like we're going to see fast changes now that we've done it once? We're going to be able to develop a little bit more quickly comparatively, since science tends to be exponential and such?
I think yes. I think there'll be fast changes in understanding and understanding the techniques of actual fusing plasma, because it's relatively easy for them to modify the design. They can change. Right now they're using deuterium, tritium. That's two isotopes of hydrogen. But there's also interest in seeing how they can get deuterium to react with itself. That requires higher temperatures, but they'll be able to see where they can get to that set. There'll be other factors that will allow it. So again, I liken this to, we've just had our Kitty Hawk moment in aviation, but we're a ways away from fighter jets, supersonic transports, commercial airlines, and so forth. But the one is absolutely necessary, because now, for example, there's a number of commercial companies looking at fusion, and the Nation facility is publishing what they're learning from. So they're making it open for people to see what happens, so that they can also modify their designs to accommodate how fusion actually occurs. It's really hard to go into the sun and do experiments inside the sun. That's it tends to not be a viable option. And before, as I said, the uncontrolled fusion created conditions where in thermonuclear weapons, the temperatures and pressures are actually much higher than they are in the sun, and creates conditions that are not really useful to understand how to do it in a controlled fashion. Well, there's no, and by the way, I want to make clear, fusion reactors are a totally different regime than bombs. It's a vastly different thing. But what it means for the planet is an energy source that is carbon neutral, and that's quite abundant, particularly if they get towards the deuterium, because right now the tritium, you have to manufacture the tritium. We can do it. It's just kind of a pain, and it's slightly radioactive. But as I said, this is really a watershed moment.
Right.
As long as the fusion people get a good PR agent to help understand, people understand stuff. Because you're right, the joke about down fusion down the road is there because they did a bad job of PR.
Yeah, it sounds to me like basically they're at the starting point. They've just reached the starting point, but they've had a bunch of false starts. And so now this could potentially be really big. However, you don't want to jump the gun. You need people. Science communication is very, very difficult. And so being able to express how important it is and why it's worth spending money on and why it's worth being interested on something without overblowing what you're capable of doing or how quickly you're going to get there. Setting a realistic expectation, essentially.
Yeah, when you don't, you get jerks like me who just takes everything with a gigantic heaping grain of salt.
And so what the Dapper's reaction is fair and expected, right? Because in the past they've done things where they have sort of accounted for things like, say, well, the amount of energy that hit the pellet was less than the amount that the pellet put out. And it's like, well, that's not really, even though to get energy to the pellet, they had to do like an order of magnitude more, right? So when they produced claims that make it sound important, or they produce claims that are hard for the public to understand. I mean, you talk about, well, they had a new record in tau factor, right? They don't communicate the science well. So the answer is yes. This is a big moment. Moreover, it's an experiment that's easy to repeat, and it's easy for them to modify and tweak and continue to up the set. It's not clear where the theoretical maximum is right now. They're doing 50% more of the energy necessary to run the reactor to the reactor produces. So it's we don't know where that level is, but that's going to be one of the items. The other business is how high of a temperature and pressure can they get to the point where they're doing deuterium reaction. Deuterium tritium tokamaks can work, but the other thing that the fusion people don't do well is they try to say, well, this is fusion, so we don't have all those nasty radioactive products that fission stuff. And they make it sound like that this is radiation free, and the answer is no. Fusion reactors will produce radiation. It's we do nuclear stuff, that's going to happen, right? But the good news is that the vast majority of stuff, you're not going to have the depleted fuel problems that the fission reactors have. You'll have radiation, but the radiation will be of things that are relatively short-lived. And that's so the whole waste problem that fission reactors have is not present in the fusion reactors. But they say things like, well, it's a mistake to say that fusion reactors are radiation free. Whenever you're dealing with the nucleus, you're getting radiation. That's just a given.
No way
I don't know,
going around that.
Add
Oh yeah,
add
no,
to that.
it's true. I mean, yeah, I do think one of the big problems I think with all nuclear options, fission included, is that there is just not enough public understanding with what radiation means, what levels of radiation are dangerous, what kinds of radiation are being put out by nuclear power, both those that are operating as well as hypothetical new devices. Um, like one of the things that I sometimes see is people look at some big number. I'm like, oh my goodness, this was 50 microsieverts. I'm like, yep. Do you know what that means? No. And it's like, well, it's not much. I can tell you that. It's not gonna ruin your day if you get 50 microsieverts of exposure.
You'll survive.
Yeah, you'll be just fine. Have you ever taken a plane ride? So I think, to me, there's two big barriers to. Yeah, well, so there's two big barriers that I see to fission energy. The first is the technical side, and to be fair, I don't know a whole lot about that. Landon knows more than that by a lot than I do. I just know that I've heard a lot of big claims, and I've seen a whole lot of nothing coming out of that sector. So,
Yeah.
But the other big barrier, which I think might, in the long run, be the bigger barrier, is actually just the public acceptance. Because one of the things is, I mean, if you look at fusion power right now, it doesn't have the theoretical awesomeness of fusion, but fission is currently the safest way to produce power, even when you include all of the nuclear accidents that have happened. It still has the lowest number of deaths per megawatt hour, and it also has the lowest number of injuries per megawatt hour. It is and that's just by a lot, right? Like things like solar power and wind are many times more dangerous than a nuclear power plant. Many times more dangerous.
And coal plants are are far more radioactive.
Oh my goodness!
Than nuclear plants. Even the ones that go foof, or they're mismanaged, right?
Yeah, that coal discharge from the smokestacks, full of radiation, like you wouldn't believe compared to like when you see the steam coming off of a cooling tower in a nuclear power plant, there's basically no more radiation than there is above background. But that is not true for the stuff coming off of a coal plant.
Yeah. So some of the things like the oil shale stuff in Alberta, has a very bad level of radioactivity in there. Sorry.
Yeah.
Question from the chat is how does since you brought it up, is how does this new development affect how we should be approaching or should we be pursuing fission, if at all?
Well, I think we should be. I just think that I'm skeptical as to how soon it's going to be coming about as a reliable power source.
Fair.
You said, I want to be sure. I thought you said fission, which to me I would say the current reactors are.
I thought we meant fusion.
No, sorry, fission. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we should definitely be pursuing fission, an expansion of fission, right? So here's the thing, right? Global warming is a big problem, and the only way to solve this is to take the country scale power distribution networks that currently predominantly work on various fossil fuels, whether it be natural gas or coal or whatever else, and transition them to a combination of things that are renewable resources like wind and solar or geothermal or hydraulic or hydro, whatever, you know what I'm talking about, and nuclear. But the problem is that right now there's a big push to add renewable capacity, which is fine, but unless you have a reliable backup to that can fill in any power gaps without question, they're not going to work to actually provide long-term power to the power grid. So right now what happens is every time you get a new wind farm or a new solar farm, you build like a natural gas or a coal plant nearby to pick up the slack. That's not really going to cut it. Yeah. We need to replace that slack covering facility with nuclear power, or in places where wind and solar and other options aren't really great because of just geography. the only green option is nuclear. And yes, nuclear accidents can be disastrous, but I mean, so is just unchecked climate change from burning fossil fuels, and ultimately so is coal, and so is gas, and to a lesser extent, but still more so than nuclear power, so are or wind and solar. Right? Those still kill more people.
Sure.
So that's all I got.
And I like add to what Dapper excellent point that Dapper said. To have your energy policy and your energy systems need to be multimodal. If someone says everything can be done by blah, you can replace everything and just do tidal or whatever the thing is, they're giving you a Kent Hovind.
Bag of bullshit.
You need multiple sources. Some of it, as Dapper said, is because of like time of day stuff, where or seasonal stuff where you have variations. You need hydro and nuclear and and wind and solar and these other things. Other thing as well is that petroleum products have a valuable function. There are things you can only do with petroleum products that you can't do with something like a hydroelectric dam, like for example building fertilizers or doing some plastics or things like that. There are things where we should stop wasting some of the petroleum products by just burning them and start using petroleum products for things that they're unique for. And we've seen also that the problem with energy production is political by and large.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
which is linked to political corruption and big oil stuff.
Exactly.
And the parties and the governments like quibbling with each other.
We've seen this in the whole Ukraine, Russia, Europe thing.
Yep.
Where Europe finally just we're being anti-nuclear because that was the thing that politicians could jump on.
Mm-hmm.
And
the talking
Europe
point.
started to try to say when they're, and all of a sudden they said, oh wow, this petroleum process is unreliable. But the reason why, for example, Europe has not effectively kneecapped the Russian military economy is because they're still sucking at the tit of Russian petroleum products.
Right.
And I'm tired of that.
Natural gas also.
Right? Yeah.
Natural gas also.
I wish, even though it cause hardship, I wish someone would go and take out all of the Russian energy supply lines into Europe. This
channel is not advocating terrorism, by the way. That is not what's happening.
Dapper, we're on my channel, not your channel.
Okay, fine. Maybe it is. I don't know. It's your community guideline strike.
And I don't mean to blow them up. I mean, stop them. Turn off the taps.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't mean to say go and do acts of terrorism, because that is funding the Russian military machine.
Yeah.
And we know how to embargo a country's energy production. The problem is the world is duplicitous and says no. Now what's happened is that all of a sudden said, well, gee, Russia might shut it off anyway, and so now they're saying maybe nuclear is good and ramping that up again. So
adding to that, what Landon said about Ukraine, Russia, and Europe taking the petroleum and natural gas. This conflict actually rose when the war between Russia and Ukraine started, and what the US media and the European media started doing, they started targeting the third world countries like India and asking them, oh, why do you get gas and petroleum? You should stop as a moral policy. And I think so it was their foreign minister or their energy minister, one of them said, pointed out, I'm like, he said, has Europe stopped first? He's like, we don't even get like 2% or 3% of our total intake from around the world. He's like, and he said something that was like, I'm like, fair. He said, they are going to look after the interests of their people first. Right. It's a 1.2 billion economy, democracy, and they said they have been elected to look after the interests of their people first. and which kind of plays into sovereignty. He said that if that everyone who was crying at that time about stopping to import petroleum and natural gas from Russia, they should follow their own advice first. So if
That's fair.
Europe had led by an example, or US, that would have maybe prompted other nations. But yeah,
Do as
and
I
now
say, not
nobody's
as I
talking
do.
about it.
Now,
There's a question from the
sorry.
chat also, just to clarify, since we were on Ukraine and gas and nuclear. They were asking about if bombing going on in Ukraine and the war in general is going to have an impact on nuclear as it is now, as well as moving forward.
I mean, certainly Ukraine had some substantial nuclear plants that used to supply electricity to Europe as well. And Russia's current activity seems to be, let's target civilian infrastructure, particularly power plants, to make it harder for civilians to stay in there. And they, and whatever things they degrade morale or so forth.
Hospitals and also
Yeah, that sort of thing to have impact.
They're
Now,
also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
But there's something else as well that I think is important to try to understand. So yes, there is a level of hypocrisy of Europe asking other people to come first, in terms of cutting down on Russian exports, or importing Russian petrochemicals.
Yeah, and putting
Now the situation,
caps on profit, so that way they're still sending out, but they're not making any money on it.
but there is a worrying shift, and the worrying shift is that it used to be that India took 0.2% of Russian petroleum exports.
Yeah,
Right
that's
now,
example. I
India
even went
accounts
beyond
for
that.
about 10%. It's jumped over 50
Darn it,
times
India.
since the beginning of in war. And one of the concerns right now is that Modi and Putin came to an agreement to talk about how to ramp up the energy import into India, right? And so we see a process of predicting, if things continue to go where it is, as Europe cuts down, India can pull it in. Now, to be fair to India as well, one of the things that was done to India was that the sort of the slowdown of sharing of nuclear technology, right? Of nuclear power plant technology in India. And this was because they were the India Pakistan nuclear blah blah blah. There was sort of like this notion of getting back on it. So if countries want to help India not become dependent on Russia, they need to also help India develop a wider variety of power sources. That being said, I don't like the fact that India seems to have the ability to undercut and to fund there if Russia goes up, because the even though right now it's at 10%, the parameters are in place to make that go up much higher.
So, jumping off of that point, since we are on the topic of India, India and China. So, India and China. I like that chat did jump the gun on this one. So, tell me. As well as India, yeah, that's the testing. They're testing missiles as well, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah. I think so. India just tested a long-range missile just near the Indo-Chinese border, and the Chinese are not happy about it. So
I mean, I don't fully blame them for not being happy about it, but also it's not like they're being well behaved in this situation either.
they are bullies. They are fucking bullies. They have invaded India, and then India has been like, what the fuck, and have driven them out, and then they keep doing these little military invasions, and they disrupt the civil life of the people, the eastern people up there. And it's not just there are farmers and stuff. There are tribal people there too, who depend on forests for their resources and stuff. So So they cause so much disruption there, and we are just like, what, like, fuck off. Or
Yeah.
India is like. And
That's kind
also
of fair.
there's also like, because there's the Himalayan range is there, the glaciers are there, they're a source of a lot of water, continuous water, and that's, we have seen that we have a treaty with Pakistan on sharing those the rivers coming down that Himalayan range.
Mhm.
But yeah, it can be modified also. So there's this, and this war around getting territorial gain, or um, capturing that territory in Kashmir, because it kind of is like pushing India down further, and also controlling the resources that come out of there. Plus, what's has started happening is, so um, India, Indonesia, Philippines, etc. So that these all these countries on the coast around the Indian Ocean, these are growing economies,
Yes.
right? So how many countries do we have if I look at my notes? So Australia, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Iran, Kenya, Malaysia, Oman, Singapore, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Yemen. So these are the countries that kind of have come together and made a pact, a trade pact. Why? Because
Mhm.
they're growing economies, they're exporting more. A lot of trade channels will go through Indian Ocean. So
Yes.
there's this scrambling to buy lands in other island nations and set up ports and military bases there. China has started doing that, and India is also doing that. So, but here it comes. Which country will join which side? It's kind of a new, kind of a cold war, if I might say, but it's in trade, if I may dare say. And that's why. So what China does is, you distract the other country, right? So they do these like invasions and little invasion skirmishes to disrupt, the defense systems up north, so that the whole focus just goes there. And Indian media, they're always like that. They're like, fuck you, and they just make a big deal about it, and then hyper focus on one issue at a time. So China kind of likes to play with that. They've got that
Yeah.
little nerve, if you and they pinch it. so
Yes.
yeah, that's the whole scenario.
Does anybody else
I
have
hope.
anything on that one?
I think there's another thing, that Maanyaa, an expert in this thing, said that I think is worth paying attention to,
Mm.
because a number of people, for example, are unaware that there's a major dispute going on between China and India. In fact, I find even Indians sometimes don't understand
Yeah,
that there's a conflict, right? So
there's a
because
conflict.
I do a confession, right? And when people ask me, "Have you ever been to India or have you been to Pakistan?" and I have to say, kind of. And the reason why was about a decade and a half ago, when I used to go into China. I was a guest of the CCP, Chinese government,
Oh
because
wow.
it's important to understand the difference between Chinese,
The
China, and the
government.
CCP, the ruling party
Yeah.
of China.
Yes,
And the
absolutely.
CCP brought me into a region which is known as Kashmir,
Aha.
and it was a region that I was understanding that India and Pakistan have a disagreement over. They
Yeah.
tend not to throw rocks and sticks at each other. I mean, that's literally some of
Oh
the things that
really?
happen. We showed up at a village, right? And the villagers there, essentially what I got from the villagers was, oh, the Chinese are here, so we're Chinese. And when Chinese leave and the Indian army comes back, we'll be Indians, right?
Yeah.
If you ask them, say, we'd prefer to be Kashmir, not
Yeah.
bigger groups that sort of like,
So
because they
yeah,
complain about ignoring them.
the history of Kashmir is also very, very interesting. So when India got independence, the Kashmir was a separate state. It had its
Mhm.
own king at that time. So what Pakistan, the delegates of Pakistan and India were doing, they were going to these local, kings and queens and saying, "Oh, come to our side," and
Yes.
become part of our union, and we will ensure
Come be with me. Come, you come with me. You could be a better person than you could ever be with that other guy over there.
That's how Pakistan and East Pakistan formed, which is now East
Sure.
Pakistan, which is now for Bangladesh. And I disagreed with India's militant policy around that too, but they did what they thought was necessary at that time. So what happened was Pakistan was like, listen, if you don't, and the Maharaja for the Kashmir, he was like, I don't know, I don't care, I don't want it, I want to stay independent. And Pakistan was like, no, you're either going with India or you're going to coming with us. And they launched an attack. So the Maharaja of Kashmir, he approached the Union of India and said, can you send your troops to help defend me? And India was like, you're not part of our union, so why should we send troops to you? And then the Maharaja signed a pact with India to make Kashmir part of the union. And Pakistan is saying that's like coercion.
Yes.
So
it's a
sticky.
And the problem, of course, is the local people lose.
Right.
Yeah, and add to that. So I think so. There has been a lot of displacement in that region. We had Muslims there. We had Kashmiri Pandits also there. They are a sect of Hinduism. They follow a sect of Hinduism. So a lot of displacement of the Kashmiri Pandits have had because of all the military, or I dare say the terrorist incursion into Kashmir that Pakistan launches. And it has just confused everyone. The history is confusing, and people don't know which side they should be on. And if they don't take sides, they are labeled as anti-nationals. So that's the history of Kashmir for you.
Yeah, and it's the local people there. I mean, we saw in a temple where there are Muslims in that village area, but the Muslims particularly are scared of being seen by the Chinese because the Chinese equate Islam with being anti-Chinese, and so
it's like they have entire concentration camps and re-education camps for Muslims.
Pocket on the side.
That's not good.
They had a pocket on the side of the temple as a mosque for the Muslims to go in and pray so they could be protected, and pretend like that because of stuff. But and the local people are saying we're losing out. Doesn't matter which group is currently there. I also say that Kashmir is probably one of the most beautiful places on earth.
So
its beauty is extraordinary. It is.
I will just add one more thing to that. Landon, please finish it.
But I would say it's a problem that's come about, and one of the things that the problem is the CCP has this sort of dogma doctrine where they say this is China, and they are determined to poke at it over time. People are familiar with the CCP's claims over Taiwan. Mm-hmm. They might not, that's in the news, but they're not known. For example, Manchuria, and China has a whole disagreement with Russia on Manchuria. And there's also places like Kashmir where the CCP, unless they renounce their imperialistic, this is ours, you can't have it, they're going to continue, as Maanyaa said, like a child poking at it, right? And the level of China poking has come about because Xi Jinping, the Winnie the Pooh dictator of China, Emperor Winnie the Pooh, has decided to amp up the pushing because it plays well to his domestic audience for him to go and say, India, bad people. Taiwan, bad people. Russia, bad people. He does these sort of things to try and for his domestic play. And the problem is the people actually live there are the victims.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I
Go ahead,
agree
Maanyaa.
a lot. So I'm going to add a caveat to that. I think so. My brain froze. There was this issue of referendum also. I think so. One of the conditions of I think so, bringing Kashmir into the union was that there would be a referendum, and they will find out later if they want to be part of Kashmir, India, they want to go to Pakistan, or they want to be their own, state. But India says due to the war or the attack of 1947 and 1948 and all the displacement that has happened of the people, local people, the referendum is not going to be fair. That's what they
Mhm.
said.
So speaking
Yeah.
of, oh sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
I'm
yeah.
gonna change the topic, so I want to make sure that you
Yeah,
finish
yeah,
what
yeah.
you want to say.
So that's just what I wanted to add to that.
Yeah.
So,
And so
So
the
this
news
is just
item
back and forth.
the news item to recap is that India was
Mhm.
able to test missiles that can
Yeah.
hit most of the CCP claimed territories,
Right.
Yeah.
including China. And this was done to demonstrate to the Chinese, stop pushing us. Right? There's a tacit agreement they don't shoot each other, but instead they
Yeah.
lob legal catapult missiles and
Good.
capable
Good.
clubs and so
They're
forth.
like
It's a lot of
it's like a
bloodshed,
big
but they just
national
pretend
contest.
like, well, we're not going to shoot each other. That won't
Mhm.
make it a hot war. But in fact, China was very disturbed because India asserted itself and said, "You're going to stop doing this stuff."
This
And
bullshit.
as a demonstration, we have ability to strike back. And this disturbed China. What I predict will happen: Xi Jinping and the CCP will begin a really aggressive anti-India stuff. That
Yeah.
includes within China, as well as they send out their 50-cent army to discredit whatever India does. And so what I think I predict they'll do is they'll accentuate to the US saying, see, India's being bad by buying Russian oil. And they'll go to Pakistan
Yeah.
and say, see, India's being bad by blah, blah, blah. This is the thing they're going to do.
Yeah.
This is
They go
more
around
than just,
crying.
yes.
So,
And the people will be the victims, sadly.
speaking
Yeah.
of people you didn't know were at war with each other, Japan versus Russia.
Oh.
Again. This would not be the first time, by the way. There have been, Russo-Japanese wars before. This would be like what, number 3 or 4 or something.
From the news article I was reading, they were
Mhm.
saying that Japan is is investing into their military at an unprecedented rate currently, because they are concerned that Russia is going to treat them like they've been treating Ukraine.
I
Thoughts?
don't blame them. I don't blame them.
Well, also China as well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's always kind of an active. I don't know if that's ever
and-
gone away, so I just kind of accept that that's just is.
and North Korea, right? One of the
Right.
things. That's
Yeah,
one of the things that good.
I was going to say the tricky thing with Japan is that it's in a precarious situation in terms of its ability to use military force, because part of the treaty that was eventually signed after World War II basically meant that Japan has to jump through a whole lot of loops before it can exert any kind of military force. In fact, it's technically supposed to be calling its military power a defense force, which, I mean, to be fair,
Isn't that
they do.
required by their constitution that MacArthur forced them to adopt?
Yeah, that's part of the whole deal. Is that basically they're basically just not allowed to use the military except in very special circumstances, and so they've been relying to a large degree on things like the USA's military presence to bolster
Yeah.
their security in terms of military defense. But is the US going to get into a war with China or North Korea or Japan on the behalf of Japan? I kind of hope not.
That might be a hard sell to the
and-
American people.
They won't. They will not. They didn't interfere with Ukraine. Why are they going to interfere with?
Well, yes and no. I
Japan?
mean, Dapper says the history of Japan in being an imperialistic war power is you go back to the ages and you'll find Japan,
Oh, yeah.
China, Korea, so forth, fighting long centuries of history of that sort of thing.
Yes.
So the end result of World War II, where for example, the emperor was forced to de-deify himself,
Mhm.
and then the constitution put in place to make essentially the Japan a non-military aggressor. This is something that in Japan, the Japanese, there's been groups within Japanese to try to change the constitution and change stance. Some of those are really disgusting people, like the relatives of Tojo, may he continue to be dead, who want
I think you got
Japan
that
to
covered.
reassert its. Yeah, we got to watch out for the zombie Tojo. So they want Japan to reassert itself. There's others that are more practical about it. Let's say Japan needs to be able to defend itself. An example is North Korea. I mean, North Korea, when you talk about launching its missiles, North Korea has been trying to hit the Japanese mainland, right? They're not very good, but they've made attempts at that over time. North Korea is in a hot war, right? So if they find a Japanese fishing trawler anywhere near their stuff, they will attack it, right? It's sort of the standing orders of North Korea is you see a Japanese boat, shoot at it, because they continue to be a very hot war. I mean, you think they're mad at South Korea. Japan is very much a threat. And as well as there's disputed islands in the Sakhalin area between that and Russia. Stalin decided at the very end that of the World War II conflicts, hey, we can do some land grabs, and finally decide to go in and try to invade Japan. Open grab territory. In fact, some historians think that the accelerated bomb dropping was to try and get the U.S. to conquer Japan before the Soviets really enter into it. But that's debated.
It sounds like it's a little bit of a sticky situation. It's not exactly that Japan is expanding their military inherently because of Russia alone, but it's not. I don't know if it'd be accurate to say Russia would be a zero factor, but maybe not the highest priority factor, as the mainstream media news might have you believe.
And there's a whole big trade between Japan and Taiwan. Mm-hmm. And Japan, for example, seems much more, has recently been saying that we want to defend Taiwan should the CCP try to take over Taiwan's government.
Right. So it is about time for our mid-roll ad. I would like to introduce everybody to our very first sponsor of the show. I hope you all are excited. I'm going to ask everybody in here to mute yourselves, please, while our ad plays. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. This is Donald Trump. Hopefully your favorite president of all time, better than Lincoln, better than Washington, with an important announcement to make. I'm doing my first official Donald J. Trump NFT collection right here and right now. They're called Trump Digital Trading Cards. These cards feature some of the really incredible artwork pertaining to my life and my career. It's been very exciting. You can collect your Trump digital cards, baseball card, or other collectibles. Here's one of the best parts. Each card comes with an automatic chance to win amazing prizes like dinner with me. I don't know if that's an amazing prize, but it's what we have. Or golf with you and a group of your friends at one of my beautiful golf courses, and they are beautiful. I'm also doing Zoom calls, a one-on-one meeting, autographing memorabilia, and so much more. We're doing a lot. My official Trump digital trading cards are $99, which doesn't sound like very much for what you're getting. Buy one and you will join a very exclusive community. It's my community, and I think it's something you're going to like, and you're going to like it a lot. They also make perfect gifts. So you can buy them with your credit card or crypto. All you need is an email address. Go to collecttrumpcards.com and buy your Trump digital trading cards right now before they are all gone, and they will be gone. This is my first official Trump trading card NFT collection, and you get a chance to meet me. Go to collecttrumpcards.com right now, and remember, Christmas is coming, and this makes a great Christmas gift.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited.
Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed our little commercial there.
Wow.
Don't be too mad at me. I'm kidding.
We broke Maanyaa. She's just gone now.
She's just. I'm pretty sure Trump obliterated. Yeah, she got obliterated by the Trump laser eyes.
The laser eyes hit her. Yeah.
What? I mean, isn't that the essence of grifting?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's a
And by the way,
transparent
that
grift.
that ad was not edited.
No.
This is not Chesh in her artwork.
No.
Making fun of her.
No, if
That is serious.
somebody on the Discord suggested that I make like art of Trump to like make like fake cards, and I said if I made fake cards, they would look too real, like they'd look too good compared to
Yeah.
like this garbage AI Photoshop nonsense.
Well, one of my favorite
I
things is
don't
people
think
have
they-
actually been finding. Oh, sorry, the original outfits
Yes.
on places like here's a place where you can buy like army surplus fighter pilot uniforms, or like
Yep.
hey, you want to have like your movie to have a spacesuit costume, here's a place where you can buy it. And then like they're just lazily photoshopped with like some color palette swaps and like
Yeah.
a little bandolier hung here or there, and then Trump's face is just pasted
So-
on there with very
So
little
Dapper, are
concern
you
for
saying the
anything.
quality of the graphics is substandard? Is that what you're accusing Trump of?
Yeah, it's really substandard. Look, here's the thing, right? If you want to pay $99 for a picture of Trump, I'm not going to tell you not to. Like, whatever, do whatever you want. But don't pay $99 for something that some Photoshop guy threw together in like 3 minutes.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jack of
And-
Hearts for 2 said, "I want my Patreon refunded."
Oh, Jack.
I'm sorry. I'm
for your-
sorry.
Thank you for your £2, by the way.
Everybody wanted to talk about Trump and the NFTs and bring it up that this was happening. I like that he did say that it was going to be available on crypto after the entire fiasco that we talked about last time on the Tavern. Who got picked up in the Bahamas? Where
Right.
was he?
Yeah.
Oh,
I-
Sam Bankman-Friedman.
Yeah,
It's
Is
it Bahamas?
it's no secret that I regard
remember.
Yeah, it was
crypto as a
Bahamas.
scam.
Bahamas.
And NFT is this blockchain scam using crypto-like technology to sort of further the process. And the fact that Trump is jumping on this scam is no surprise.
And he's jumping on it after it's already collapsed.
But
It's like he's right now telling people to invest with Bernie Madoff. Like, come on, man, that ship has sailed.
yeah, so
God.
it is a thing now. As I understand it, the NFT collection sold out.
Yes, it sold out on the first day.
Yeah.
So he was right about that. When he said they will be gone, he was correct.
That's true.
My God.
Now, from my understanding, there's already been some attempts to trade them on the secondary market where they are already losing value.
Oh God. I'm
Poor
surprised.
investments.
You weren't surprised.
Yo,
Yeah.
dog, I heard you wanted to know about poor investments, so we gave you $100 NFT Trump cards, collectibles that you could then try to resell with
Yeah.
crypto. With
Yeah,
crypto. With
Yeah.
crypto.
This is
So do you
just
think Trump will
aging
run
like
another-
fine milk.
Real
Do you think
fast.
Trump will run another set of cards like this, or will he try
Yeah,
to
why not?
extend or dilute the existing cards? Or will he do another set?
I don't
Well, I think
know.
he's going to do more. I think he'll do more crypto stuff. Because here's the thing, right? If they sell out, what does he care if the people who buy them lose money in the long run? He doesn't care about them.
Not
It's
There's
a quick
also-
fundraising scheme for him.
There is a
He's a quick-
secondary level to this, though, right? It's that since he announced his presidency,
Oh God.
how is this going to affect that?
Candidacy.
I mean, this is technically nothing to do with his presidency, right? It's just
Technically
marketing
true.
his brand.
Okay, but
So-
yeah, but marketing his brand is marketing that and that he's going for president again is getting his name back out in the media a bunch, right? So, like, do you see
Well,
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying?
He's already trailing Ron DeSantis by double digits. So
Oh
like,
yeah, because that's what everybody wants. President
But
Florida
in some
man.
ways-
Yeah.
In some ways, his campaign is essence of grifting, right?
Oh, yes.
And one of the things that's been happening to that party that has aided and abetted Trump
Mhm.
is that when he does things like this and raises money, they don't get the money, right? Trump does not share his campaign contributions or his grifting stuff like with NFTs with the GOP.
Right.
And so my
Right.
thought is, well, gee, Trump, go out and produce another trading card thing of an order of magnitude bigger and reel in the money, because it'll be harder for people, other people whose policies I disagree with, to raise funds. Again, there's a big difference between, let's say, I have a major policy disagreements with DeSantis. However, I don't equate DeSantis with someone who supports insurrection, wants to toss out the U.S. Constitution, and has narcissistic tendencies. There's a difference between disagreeing with someone like Ted Cruz and saying someone like Trump, who is actually a danger to democracy, a danger to the Constitution, and a danger there. So as long as the GOP continues to aid and abet this insurrectional narcissist, then I hope the insurrectional narcissist continues to suck money out, because the people who pay money for these cards have less money available to support the GOP, who's aiding and abetting Trump. If the GOP were to become honest with themselves, they'd chuck Trump out the door and try to run on their own. The problem is the margin of error, the margin of balance of power is small enough that these MAGA heads matter. This is why someone like Minority Leader McCarthy is pretending to be a Trump supporter and pretending to encourage the MAGA vote, because he wants their votes to become speaker.
Right. I mean, there's lots of problems with DeSantis as well. I don't think anybody on this panel in particular would want to see him as president, although I would probably reach out there that two people here are even in America. One person's Indian who's in New Zealand. I'm Canadian, so we're going to automatically be far more left than the scale, the American scale is. So,
but by being a Canadian, you actually know more about America than most Americans do. So
just by caveat of living upstairs, sound travels real well. So the thing is that DeSantis has problems, but he's got problems for everybody, not just problems when it comes to like the Conservative Party of America, because a lot of the Conservative Party of America is extreme conservative. The Conservative Party that we're seeing nowadays is not the Conservative Party from 30 years ago, for example.
And understand, I want the GOP to be an effective opposition party.
Oh yes, there's nothing wrong with that.
That's a healthy thing. But as long as the GOP aids and abets this insurrection and narcissist, they can go play far, as my friend from Damascus used to say.
Now, in addition to that, we have a question from the live chat, and it's Rez, and Rez is asking, who would you prefer not become president, Trump or Kanye West?
I mean, on the one hand, Trump is less explicit in his love of just outright
Nazis,
20th century fascists.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there is that, which is ironic because Trump would be far safer under their regime than would Kanye.
Yes. No. This is true.
So yeah, I think Kanye might be actually less mentally stable. So
fair.
While Trump is not exactly a paragon of mental stability, he's someone people can influence him, right? Like, we had a lot of reports coming from the White House, to some extent after the fact, about how basically Trump just went with whoever was flattering and who spoke with him most recently in terms of his policy. That's something that you can have some kind of control over. Kanye, I don't think, is mentally aware enough of his surroundings to be influenced, even in a good way, by people surrounding him. So if I had to pick who I would rather keep out of the presidency for sure, I would probably go with Kanye West. I think he would actually be somehow even more destructive than Trump.
But the question is Conway a troll, or is he genuinely believing this stuff?
Here's the thing, right? There are lines that you don't normally cross when you're trolling. and going around actively endorsing, the National Socialist German Workers' Party and posting their logos on your Twitter and talking about how much you love
Yeah.
Hitler. Yeah, that's not a troll
God.
behavior. That's there are certain things that like you don't really troll about. There's an acceptable time to say that you're pro Hitler. It's when you've been hired to play a Nazi in a movie or TV show. That's it.
But you see, one of the things is, again, in terms of, opposition people, I think democracy works when various voices can dialogue and try to come with some consensus there. It's not that I want the GOP to win, nor would I want DeSantis to be president. But what I fear about Trump, and this is why I don't know about Conway, is that Trump has learned that the adults around him kept him from being Trump, right? As Zapper said, we learned a lot about people that sort of got him. And what I'm concerned is that he's learned, because none of those people have basically come out and said, Trump's an idiot, don't let him near the White House. The problem I would face is that if Trump gets back into the White House, some of those adults are not going to be there to keep Trump from doing Trumpy things.
But would the people that were there now be more effective at it because they'll have notes from predecessors?
Trump doesn't want those people anymore. A number of them have been subpoenaed and have testified against him. None of them have spoken out. There's very few of his original inner circle of his beginning presidency that Trump even talks to, let alone trusts. And so you'd have people like Giuliani as Attorney General. You'd have the pillow guy as the chief of staff, and Marjorie Taylor Greene as the ambassador. You'd have. I'm making this up.
You'd have Kanye West as your vice president.
Yes, type of thing. That's and Trump would look at this to say, what can I do to enhance my brand? Is selling the vice presidency to someone the likes of Conway, does that help my brand or not?
I'm just imagining that the reason, you're saying Conway, you're talking about Kanye, and I'm imagining that you're just pronouncing I'm imagining you're pronouncing his name wrong because you don't care enough to learn what his name is.
I do not like the person, and so I don't want to insinuate or to promote Mr. Khan's brand.
Oh, there we go. I like that. Mr. Khan is pretty good.
There you go.
Yeah.
I just don't want to associate him with the guy who invented the game of life.
That's
fair. The famous computer thing where you had the cells. Yeah, I don't because that's a pretty famous thing in computing.
All right, so let's take off into space because fuck this planet, and the world we live in right now because it's absolute nonsense. The ISS. So just in the past week, the ISS had a coolant fluid leak, which they found out. Originally, they just saw something. It was
on a Soyuz capsule.
Well, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Let the goblins do the goblins' work.
Do you want to you just do it?
Okay. Well, there was going to be on the ISS.
I have notes.
Moving and then essentially a radiator, right? Because I don't know if you know, but there's a problem with ejecting waste heat into space. It's hard to do because there's no convection. So basically, you have to do it by radiation. The best way to do that is to basically just have big metal fins. So you're going to move one of these, but during preps for the EVA, NASA basically noticed that there was some particles leaking from where a coolant pipe was on a Soyuz crew capsule, which had recently delivered 2 cosmonauts. So that EVA was put on indefinite hold while they try to figure out what to do with this leak, whether it can be fixed, whether the Soyuz capsule is safe. I wouldn't trust it. If I were anyone, I wouldn't want to go back on it. But then if it's not safe, you have a problem. We're like, okay, well, now you have a Soyuz capsule occupying a docking port. How do you get rid of it? Because in space, you can't just detach things and expect that they'll just go away. You have to have some kind of control over them to safely move them away. Because if you detach it now, it's just going to be in a similar orbit to the ISS for many, many
orbits. And
orbits.
We'll come back and hit it again.
Right. And it will hit it at an uncontrolled speed in an you have some idea about the direction, but the fine details of that will be rather random because who knows what kinds of interactions it's going to have as it tumbles away through what thin atmosphere is up there. So yeah, it's not an emergency.
You know,
Everyone is safe, but like it's also concerning.
you know what this
And I
reminds me of?
agree, Dapper, that the Soyuz capsules now are the best things that can escape the corruption that is the current Russian space program, right? The level of corruption going on and graft and greed going on in there is extraordinary. That the current Russian space program, both manned and unmanned, is just a faint shadow of what the Soviets used to do. The Soviet space program was quite significant, but corruption, greed, and decay is turned that into a bad thing. The ISS itself is old and creaky, right? It's near its limited.
It's lasted longer than it was supposed to, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Did it not?
Yes, and they've sort of extended it for a while because we're getting useful stuff out of it. But the Soyuz program is I mean, I think it's about time for the space program to say to the Soyuz program, thank you very much. See you later. And let's start decommissioning the ISS, which means you got to break up pieces of it and have it go into atmospheric entry with rockets and so forth. That's going to take some effort so that the thing doesn't crash down and hit. Usually, things hit Australia or Canada. Those seems to be the two, places.
Yay!
You know what this reminds me of? This
What?
reminds me of an accident that happened a few years ago. You remember Kalpana Chawla and the crew? Something happened with the rocket as they were coming back, and they said there was something leaking at that time too.
Yes.
So yeah,
And there's claims about sabotage and other things there, but
The leak was specifically from a MS-22 propulsion module, by the way.
yeah. Chesh, could you finish reading your notes? By the way, you had a number of things before we explained the 100
Come on in.
levels of the space station.
Well, I was gonna get into that anyway, so he already covered it.
Please.
No, Dapper already covered it. He did. No, he actually did. He covered it exactly. Basically, what I was saying. There was supposed to be a spacewalk that was supposed to happen. The spacewalk got canceled because they registered something was going on, and yada yada yada.
I mean, what I would do with ISS is I would contract with India to send up rockets to help decommission and have a controlled burn reentry of the parts of ISS.
I think that would. I think that would be fair, and it would be like a glorious signing off party.
Oh, it'd be a nice light show. I mean, get some boats out in the Pacific, take some cameras.
Oh yeah, go get yourself the P1000, the Nikon P1000, the flat earther camera of choice.
I was saying, because India does have a significant space program. I mean, I think they're probably number 3 in the world in terms of being able to get stuff up reliably there. And what you need to say to the Russians is thanks for all the fish.
Yep.
Keep your stuff. In fact, you send it, send the Soyuz if you can, elsewhere, and you begin to decommission ISS.
So
sad as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be sad to see it go.
Maybe it's time for a new space station.
It would be nice to see everybody working together to build a new one. Might bring us together.
Part of the whole Artemis program, which, by the way, has a lot of European Space Agency involvement and Canadian Space Agency involvement, even Australians are involved, that sort of thing, is to build a station around the moon, for which Artemis goes there, and then they do the moon space station to land and back up type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the area we want to go. And so I would advocate taking the resources that we're spending trying to sustain ISS and put it into Artemis station.
Take it and push it over there.
Now we have to find out, because Landon has almost always been to all of the relevant places that we talk about. Landon, have you been to the ISS or the moon?
I have not been to the ISS.
If he says he's been to the moon, I'm finishing this entire thing of water in one go.
I've not been to the moon.
Okay, I'm safe.
We're working with a group to put a telescope on the moon, and so that sort of thing is depending upon how well Artemis does, because I think the time we get the telescope on the moon with Artemis is around Artemis 7. And
Okay, would you
so,
be
assuming, of course,
physically
they don't have a
accompanying
major
it?
disruption.
Right. Would you be physically accompanying this telescope?
I don't think I need to. I'm
Okay.
more interested in having the telescope operate on the moon and have people be able to service it, right? So you don't have the
Right.
Hubble problem.
Right.
But the moon is an extraordinary platform for radio telescopes, for telescopes going way up into the high ultraviolet and down into in the infrared. It's a great thing for astronomy, and in fact, it's one of the things that for example, there's a for example, there was a large company in Silicon Valley whose name begins with a G, where my thing was, if you want to hire me, this is what I want to do, is to put a telescope on the moon, because I think a telescope on the moon will be of the order, if not better, than what the James Webb can do in some circumstances. Not the long frequency mid IR, but in terms of some of the other capabilities, it's an important set. But yes, I have not had that opportunity. I've been high up in the Earth, from the Earth to the point of seeing the opposite curvature. Take that, flat Earthers. But only a limited amount of time. I like to say, I'm the flat Earthers' worst nightmare. But I have
Nightmare.
not yet had the privilege. Yes.
Okay, so back down to earth in a what is your government doing about this problem? And we're going to start off with New Zealand. So New Zealand is introducing a ban on smoking that if you were born after or in 2008 or onward, you will not be allowed to buy cigarettes at all, no matter what your age. Ever.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
this is I don't know if this is passed yet. This is currently working its way through the New Zealand system. If it is not stopped, it basically means if you were born in 2008, you're born in 2009, if you were born in 2010, etc., 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 you will never be able to legally buy cigarettes at all. How do we feel about this, panel?
People will always find a way around to get hold of cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
All the like the youngsters will go to the adults and try and sneak in cigarettes from there. But if New Zealand is thinking that 2008 onwards, their grandparents or parents, kind of like that generation that smoked a lot has gone away. Maybe that's why they have chosen this date, so that adults don't motivate this kind of behavior or promote this kind of behavior. So I think so. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, people don't like it when you take things away from them. They
True.
People think they are the best people. They are themselves the best person to make a decision for themselves. But I think so in the long run, it's good. They haven't banned vaping, though. They're not going to ban vaping. So vaping has its own
That's next year's legislation.
Probably.
It's also specifically a ban on cigarettes in particular. This is not a ban on tobacco, nor a ban on nicotine items in its totality. It would just remove... So it's not like a full-on prohibition, right? It is just a specific product. That's not going to stop you from basically buying tobacco and rolling your own. It's not going to stop you from getting a vape that potentially has the equivalency of whatever is in the cigarettes in New Zealand, because I don't know what's in the cigarettes in New Zealand, but you wouldn't be, nothing's going to stop you from essentially making your own should you want to do so. So it is skirting that line of prohibition. Dapper, what do you think about this? And then we'll get to Landon.
So I'm not generally a big fan of the idea that the law should prevent you as an adult from doing things that are essentially dangerous to you, but that you want to do, provided that you have access to all the information that would allow you to make an informed decision. So, for instance, if people are lying about cigarettes, well, I think the correction there should be to make it a problem legally for you to lie about cigarettes in your ads and whatnot. But just from like the philosophical standpoint of things like bodily autonomy and that people are allowed to make choices about their own health, I'm not a huge fan of just saying, cigarettes are bad for you, therefore we won't let you have them. I don't think it's a great precedent because, for one thing, while it is a bit of a slippery slope type thing, there is a question to be asked if we can just ban things because they're unhealthy, which is, as far as I can tell, the only reason to ban cigarettes. Well,
I see
where's
where
the
it's
cutoff?
going.
Do we
Yeah.
do we also ban cigars? Do we ban
Coca-Cola?
alcohol? Do we ban
Coke?
Coca-Cola? Do we ban cheeseburgers? And some of those are more ridiculous than others, but I mean, it's not like countries haven't tried banning alcohol.
There
So,
is
like,
there is an addictive quality that I think you would hear as an argument to what you just put forward. My position on this is totally different, but just to play devil's advocate
Yeah.
because that's kind of my
Like
job.
we have regulations also, around food and stuff like that. So if you're cooking food commercially and distributing it, you have to follow
Right.
these food like regulations and stuff. So adding to that what Dapper said, plus if they are just going to pass this law standalone, it will not work.
Mhm.
If they want to work, they have to control the tobacco that's coming in the country and getting distributed.
Well, it
And
depends on if
access
the
to-
issue is with tobacco versus cigarettes, because those are not the same thing.
Yeah.
right, if
Yeah,
you
what
don't
about
ban
e-cigarettes?
cigars but you ban cigarettes, then people are just going to make
Yeah.
tiny cigars
Yeah.
and sell them.
Let's say tobacco products. How about that? Need to look into it holistically and see
Sure.
what are the tobacco products. Maybe they started with cigarettes because that's that product is the most consumed in New Zealand, perhaps. So they might start edging towards other tobacco products in the future. But if they don't control how much tobacco is coming into the country, yeah,
Is
not gonna work.
weed legal in New Zealand?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Cannabis oil is, but not weed. Yeah.
Yeah, just for clarification.
I almost forgot. I'm like, I work in that field. I should know this.
Surprised her. Landon, what do you think?
So, personally, I regard use of tobacco industry's products as a really bad thing. And if you use products from the tobacco industry, I regard your behavior as sucking, right? And
I mean, that is kind of literal.
I know that there are people.
Right.
I know that people here, I've experienced them using those kind of products, and I regard that behavior as being very bad. That being said, as well as I say, the tobacco industry is probably the most significant drug pushers around. And I remember, as a elected official, where there was some California initiatives about trying to stop the tobacco industry sponsoring things and you doing advertisement, and they pushed ads to try to stop that. And I would name, when I had problems with privileges, the head of people like R.J. Reynolds and the Durham family and so forth as the most significant drug kingpins and drug pushers in our society. Right, the tobacco industry is amongst the worst scum this entire planet has known.
Yes.
I highly recommend watching a movie called Thank You for Smoking, by the way, if you're curious about a little bit the way that works.
So if I see you, however, if I see you using tobacco products, I'm not going to tell you no, because I do not believe prohibition works. And I am opposed to prohibition.
I agree.
I would, as an elected official, refuse to take Nancy's just say no, things. That surprised people because they knew my vehement opposition to the tobacco industry, and my dislike of smoking. But I would not, for example, do the Just Say No campaign or say make tobacco illegal. In fact, I don't even like the notion of let's tax tobacco to the extraordinary level it does, because again, that's an indirect form of prohibition. I don't think prohibition works. And I would not want to make prohibition use of tobacco products illegal. I don't think it works. In fact, I think it does the opposite. In fact, I believe that some people in the tobacco industry would like laws to make it harder or impossible for people to buy tobacco products because they can then develop a black market and make more money.
Canada
So this law
has
that-
done something like that where they've heavily taxed the hell out of cigarettes. So buying cigarettes is really fucking expensive.
And so for example, you have situations, for example, in Australia where they have extraordinary tax on a pack of cigarettes, and the result is there is a lot of tobacco running. There's a whole black market under thing where stuff shows up with fake tax symbols on it, trying to get around because it becomes worth it for people who are addicted to tobacco products to get it anyway. So I support the legalization of all tobacco products, all marijuana products, so forth. I don't like this prohibition.
You know what they should control? How much the tobacco companies advertise, how they advertise,
Yes.
where they advertise.
Yes.
At a grocery
and if you
store,
want,
you're advertising cigarettes, and you can see kids they're put on kids' eye level, children's eye level, so they can see that. On purpose,
Exactly.
they are
So-
at the checkouts, etc., etc.
and you know, they're using cartoon characters and so forth. So if you want to tax stuff, tax the tobacco companies, tax the income of executives of the tobacco company products, tax the profits of the tobacco company shareholders, make owning stock in tobacco companies less profitable.
Yes.
Don't tax the users, because many of the users have been pushed into an addiction, and many of them can't help it, right? Provide medical assistance to those people who are addicted to tobacco products. I also think it is fair game to have social pressure to say, you smoke? Well, that's behavior sucks. Don't attack the person, attack the behavior.
I think that it'd be valuable to take a look for New Zealand to take a look at the way Canada handled this, because the way Canada handled this is there was heavy regulations about age restrictions around buying cigarettes. There was a move to put all cigarettes on the back behind the counter at convenience stores, so they're no longer at the front. You do not see billboards. You do not see commercials for smoking at all. You don't see any of that anywhere. There's no signage that's up anywhere. And they recently went even further with it. So not only are cigarettes behind the counter, but they're also not visible. There's actually like a blocker that covers them off, and the packs have health information about, say, the effects of cigarettes on them. And there was also a really big push for not abstinence, but for understanding the effects of long-term smoking. And so that happens in high school and earlier to make people aware, because I think one of the best ways to help people take care of themselves, because you don't want to impose on somebody and tell them what they need and not do with their body, but to educate them on what their body needs, what their body does, and what happens when you are putting specific things into your body in general.
Sure. And I think again, I do not support prohibition.
Prohibition doesn't work. Prohibition doesn't work.
I don't support the heavy tax on product users.
Right.
Because I don't want that send tax stuff. On the other hand, I would like places like Hollywood and TV to encourage them to say, you vape, you smoke, that's not cool, right? And understand, if you've done it in my presence, I haven't told you no, but on the other hand, your behavior is something I think is deleterious.
There's something
that being said, I'm not going to tell you can't.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that what you're doing is there. That being said, I want to instead say, I would say to New Zealand, put a heavy tax on the profits of tobacco companies, right? And to say to someone like RJ Reynolds, which, by the way, RJ Reynolds does a bunch of other products, and they have things like aluminum foil and all those things. You say to RJ Reynolds or other tobacco companies, we're going to tax, if you sell tobacco products, we're going to tax your entire corporate with an excise tax, right? To make it hard. Don't tax the person who has been addicted. Don't try to make it illegal. Go after the industry that does it, and also socially make it not cool.
I would say I don't know how far excise tax would work, because I think companies are so profit driven, they kind of start including these things in their costs, if I'm not wrong.
They start to, it trickles down, right? So whatever you tax on them is going to end up on the end product most of the time. There are ways around that.
Two-pronged approach is needed.
Yeah, but there are ways around that governments can implement, but that might be another discussion for another time.
Because there's governments, and again, I know more about things like what's happening in South Africa and Australia, where the amount of tax on a pack of cigarettes is just extraordinary compared to its actual value, and the governments are actually complicit in the tobacco problem because they don't want to kill off the tobacco industry; they want to grab the taxes out of it.
Right.
Yeah. It's lucrative.
So they don't stop it from being done. They enjoy the sin tax there. And the problem is they're really doing a number on those people that are addicted.
I would probably start with also putting restrictions on what's allowed to be in cigarettes. So start removing harmful products from cigarettes until you get it as far down as you possibly can, or as close as you possibly can get it to just straight tobacco.
And so I would say eliminate all tax on tobacco products and instead put a heavy tax on corporations that sell tobacco products.
Interesting.
And encourage Hollywood and sports to say smoking, vaping is not cool, to have social pressure. But at the same time, provide a medical assistance for those people that are addicted to get off of it. But don't make it illegal. Legalize tobacco, legalize marijuana, legalize all that stuff, and instead go after the pushers of drugs.
So next up, we've got, what is your Canada? What is your government doing? The housing crisis. The housing crisis in Canada, it has reached basically an all-time high for renters. We are at it's gone to Vancouver is currently the highest, with one bedroom going for $2,633 a month average, and Toronto going for $2,532 per month average. So the average across Canada has broken the $2,000 a month average. So that's a big old yikes, and that's really fucking expensive. What the government is currently looking at doing is making available $500 for low-income people. If you make less than $20K a year per person, you can get $500 back, and I really don't know what the hell that's gonna help.
Yeah, that's compared to over $2,000.
Yeah.
Well, that can also cause problems too, because some of the most rundown areas in the world which have the worst housing in the world are areas with rent control, because there's competing problems, right? Because rent prices aren't just the result of one thing. There's a number of things, like what's the availability of housing? Are there barriers to building new housing units? Are there, and I checked into this actually earlier, these prices are going up about twice the rate of inflation. So
yeah, yes, the percentage is very high. Yeah.
Right. And so just saying, well, what if we slap a cap on that? Well, if the problem is something like no new housing units are being made, then you create a different problem where rent isn't too high, but now homelessness might become a problem because no one wants to build new housing units in a rent-controlled area. Because why would you? You don't get to capitalize on that value. And so you could say, well, we'll build government housing. Well, maybe that is something to look into. So and one of the problems is that I can't find a lot of data or information when I looked at this about what is directly causing or what factors are contributing to this. Because it's not just inflation, because that accounts for about half of it. But the other half has to be something else. Is it just that there's more people looking for the same number of apartments? is there in fact some kind of regulatory thing going on that's allowing for increased prices? Like, I don't even know what the regulation is on rental properties in Canada. So it's very hard to get a policy prescription for something as complicated as that.
It is complicated. I mean, in its case by case basis, if you look for something like Vancouver, Vancouver at one time had extraordinary building boom. Right, you go to places in Vancouver, British Columbia, and the entire skyline is full of sky trains building stuff. Right, and the problem is that a lot of that, there's a lot of that set that ended up going into essentially non-Canadian investors in Canadian real estate, buying up real estate. Why? Because their country that they came from has such fictitious economies that they move money out of those economies and invest it in real estate in Vancouver. And the result is that the people who want to live and work in Vancouver are the ones that lose out.
Right.
You have other places, for example, that used to be like, for example, in Nova Scotia, Halifax used to have cost of living comparable to Saskatchewan and Manitoba, but their situation, there was basically a try to curb on the building boom, and the result was in places like Halifax, it's kind of halfway between extremes like Vancouver and Winnipeg. Now, why is Winnipeg so low in terms of cost of living? Well, I would suggest you listen to a group called Venetian Snares. They have some comments to say about Winnipeg.
I think there's also like how the banks are working, isn't it? Like, because I think so they have recently increased the tax, or I don't know what's it called, lending rates, right? So there has been an increase in lending rates. So what that's doing is it's pushing the people who want to own a house now out of that area into renting, and that's also increasing the demand for properties. So yeah, it's kind of all interrelated.
There's something from the chat I want to mention. David McGinnis had said greed. And while it's not wrong to say that this is because of greed, it's kind of like saying that the cause of an airplane crash is gravity. That's just a constant thing. There's always going to be greedy people. You're not going to get people to just stop being greedy via policy. The same way that no matter how you design your aircraft, you're not going to get rid of gravity. Greed is just one of those things that's going to exist. So when you say, well, the cause of this is greed, it doesn't provide any helpful information about how to proceed with some way to fix the problem.
Or what to do about that, yeah.
Right.
Because in case
So
of Vancouver,
true, but
non-resident foreign investors created if you call that greed, created a housing imbalance that elevated stuff. In the case of Halifax, it was public policy that was done by the regional governments, for whom people invested in running the government, who were interested in having a controlled housing market. And the result is people in Halifax having, suffering from the fact that we're seeing Nova Scotia transition from a Manitoba-like economy to a British Columbia type economy, right? And if they don't stop it, that's going to be the result. Tax policies are also a big issue, right? It's very interesting if you look at a house being right next to Canada. If you look at a house on one side of the border, the other side of the border, they're equivalent, right, in terms of style and useful stuff, you will find the house and the U.S. side to be more expensive when you take exchange into things. And why is that? Well, because in the U.S., interest is deductible. And so what happened when the mortgage deduction caused the affordability of housing to change, right? By and large, the value of a house is dependent upon your ability to pay the mortgage. So interest rates affect the value of a house, and the affordability, right? So if you're in a 30% tax bracket, let's just take round numbers in the U.S., you can afford 30% higher house value because 30% of that will be deducted on your taxes, typically. The result is you might find on one side of the border a house in the U.S. to be 30% more than on the Canada side. I don't mean to say you should eliminate the mortgage deduction, but I'm saying that one of the things that affects housing in Canada is the tax policy. And but the problem is that if someone who doesn't have a house wants a house that's affordable, people who have houses don't want that, right? It was very clear when I was in Silicon Valley that the homeowners do not want the cost of Silicon Valley houses to drop to affordable levels. Why? Because they bought at this level and they wanted to go up to that level, right? The people who have houses would like the houses to go up more. People who don't have houses would like the houses to come down. Yeah. And so there's this social thing about who has houses and who doesn't. And this is something I see that's happening in Halifax is the curtail on building new houses because they said we don't want to become Vancouver, has resulted in it harder for people to have it. And by the way, if you say I don't own a house, I'm renter and I'm going to be renter for my life, you are affected by the housing prices because your landlord owns the house and your landlord has an expectation of profits. So when housing costs go up for your landlord, guess what? Your rents are impacted too.
Yeah, because he could also just sell if that becomes more profitable for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's not really much that can be done except for grassroots regional footwork.
Well, that depends though, because there could be identifiable things. So, like for instance, we've had a suggestion that part of the problem is that the number of landowners has gone down considerably, allowing them to have a monopolistic price control. Well, that might be a thing. In which case, you could look at things like, could this be something under whatever Canadian antitrust regulations exist that could be affected? Or you could say things like, are there hurdles to getting new housing built? Could the problem just be that there aren't enough places to live? So as your supply goes down and your demand comes up, price is going to rise. That's the basics of how price works, right? Well, maybe the problem is that it's too hard to get new housing built. That's one of the problems with California in the United States, right? Why is it so expensive to live in California? Because it's essentially impossible to build an apartment building in California, or even in some cases a housing development with houses. They're almost impossible.
Near job, close enough to a job centers. That's
right. Yeah, if you want to do it out in the middle of nowhere where you have a 5-hour commute, then sure, I guess you can get that done. But what good is that?
Yes.
So is that one of the problems? Could there be a problem that's even further downstream? Like, is there something that's causing, like, say, costs for people who are operating rental properties to go up? Like, is there something happening with, like, supplies for people who are doing, like, the plumbing or electrical work? Now, that's probably not going to account for a double inflation increase, but it could account for some of it. So there's a whole lot of things, and we can't just say, well, it's going up. It's because of some simple thing like greed or the government did a bad job, and then just kind of say, well, now there's, I guess, we just have to, organize for better rent. Sure, organize for better rent, but one of the important things is if you really want a solution that's practical, you have to dig into the reasons. And look, maybe that monopolistic control in some areas that David McGinnis was talking about, maybe that is the big thing. Antitrust kind of things.
In New Zealand. So in New Zealand, what they're trying to do is they're trying to spread out the main like trade centers and stuff to different parts of New Zealand, so the population can move to that side and we can start development. And at the same time, if you're living too outside the city, there's development there also. So they are trying to come up with, because pandemic has given ideas to people, right? So they're trying to come up with this, now people kind of negotiate in their working contract that I live here, I can't come to work every day, it's a 2-hour commute, can I work from home for some of the days? So that can also help in
Yep.
You know,
And I think
yeah.
taxing
with the case with New
and
Zealand,
yeah,
transportation is going to be an important thing, because if you
Yeah.
start to spread out
Yes.
stuff, you need to invest in your transportation to allow people to
Yep.
be able to move around. Even if you say,
Yes.
I work from home, you visit friends, you visit family. And so
Yes.
investing in
Exactly.
public infrastructure and transportation is
Yeah.
is important. And this is something in the Silicon Valley that was a problem, because Silicon Valley really fell behind in terms of public transportation.
Yep.
But you know, the problem, of course, is that rent control has a problem. And when I would meet with people when I was elected official in Silicon Valley, and they said, we want you to propose rent control, and I said, but it's not going to pass. And if you want rent control, you need to get the voters behind you. In the case of California, a homeowner was 7 times more likely to vote in local elections than a renter.
Right.
What this meant is that the renters would come and say, put on a ballot rent control. It would be voted down. Why? Because the homeowners, the landowners, would vote against it.
Right.
Because renters would not bother to register to vote, let alone turn out in elections.
Not my monkey, not my
They
problem.
they might vote for a president thing, but they don't pay attention to the local things.
So yeah, local and regional is very, very important if you want
Politics are very
changes
important,
in
guys.
your area. That's just general about everything. But before we go too deep further into that one, which I think we can come back to at a later date, because I feel like this is going to be a long-lasting problem. We have one more thing to cover, but just before that, I'm just going to jump in real quick and ask everybody to please like and share the stream. Just be careful if you're sharing on Twitter. Elon Musk has been banning journalists. So just be a little bit cautious depending on where you go and what you're doing.
Mastodon.
Share it on Mastodon or wherever you're going. But if you do share it on Twitter, that's also greatly appreciated. But yeah, that's a thing that's going down. I just did want to touch on that. And then he did, like, there's been some funny crap that's gone on with Elon Musk, but we'll probably have to cover that another time because we are getting short on time. And the last one's a big one. Maanyaa, would you like to take it away with Qatar?
Oh my God, the 2022 Qatar World Cup. So recently, Qatar has come under limelight for its labor laws. It all started after it was named the host in 2010 for the 2022 World Cup, and the Guardian released an investigation in 2013 about the abysmal labor laws in Qatar and other Middle Eastern countries. So there are a lot of Middle Eastern countries, and they're called the GCP group. I don't know, but in Middle East, the way the labor was hired before was through a kafel system. Kafel means adopt or support. You can pick your poison. So in that system, what happens is a company will register with the immigration department. The immigration department issues them an immigration card and representing documents. Then they apply for block work permits, like a lot of work permits at a time, not couple, more than that. And then work permits for foreign workers, and then they apply for work visas for the foreign workers. And when the foreign workers are in the country, within 7 days they have to arrange a resident permit for them. What would happen in those circumstances is you cannot leave the country if an employer didn't want you to. You need to take permission from your employer to leave the country. So these on top of that, the housing was bad. There's no like guidelines around what the accommodations should be like, what healthcare should be like. So that big thing came out. So in 2014, what Qatar did was they got rid of the kafel system. They kind of modified it. So they said that the employers are not going to sponsor the workers. Plus, you don't need a permit to leave the country. You can leave on your own. Then, I think so. In 2015, 2015 was it? A new wage system was introduced, and the salary will be paid monthly for them. And then they made another increase in the minimum wage from 750 reals to 1,000 reals in 2017. And by 2018, they established a disputes committee. And at that point, the International Labor Organization stopped their investigation against them. They were like, "Yeah, we are satisfied with what they're doing." So, and in April of 2020, Qatar kind of provided like 824 million dollars to pay wages for the migrant workers who were stuck because of who sorry, not stuck but undergoing treatment for COVID. So that's the whole story, like the timeline of what's happening. Some organizations like Amnesty International are saying the conditions are still bad, but I see they have made some steps in that direction. So I think so maybe 2022 World Cup was a good thing, at least for the migrant workers in that country, because it was happening anyways before. You had construction workers and domestic workers most affected by it because they would come in blocks, and the employer had a full control over their stay, were paid, or whether they can go home or not.
Basically, what
And
you're saying is that as bad as the conditions are currently, they were worse. And having
yes,
Qatar hosting the
2022 World Cup.
2022 World Cup, there was at least a spotlight was shined onto it, although it got a little bit better. However, the number increased, and it was so drastic that it was able to. Do you see what I'm saying? Am I getting what you're saying?
The number increased, sorry?
The number of people that were pulled in to prepare for the 2022
Yeah,
right
a lot
was
of migrants.
so this was something that was happening anyway, but because they paid off FIFA, because there's problems with FIFA, because they paid off FIFA, they ended up with way more people suffering from these problems than they did initially, even though the problem still already existed.
They are trying. I see it like I kind of agree with you. We don't know how these laws are being, implemented. These modifications that they have made to their laws, regulations, how are they like implemented, and how people are held responsible or liable if something happens. What I found was a document recently that Qatar, where did it go? Where are you? Sorry. Um, Submitted to the International Labor Organization, where they have made changes into their key legislation. So, which includes employers have to provide accommodation, have to provide yearly health checks.
Does it say what
The employ
does it say what the accommodation needs to be? Like, does the accommodation have
Yeah,
minimums?
that's what I was going to go to. Like, it doesn't
Mhm.
specify. It's very superficial. You know
Right.
what I mean? But I guess it's a start.
Mm.
So yeah, I kind of think it was a good thing that Qatar got that limelight, because everybody's like, whoa, what? And the International Labor Organization kind of was like, if you want to be part of this world, you need to work with us. And the laborers need to be and construction workers and domestic workers need to be protected. So just for fun, UAE, it's completely illegal to hold someone against their will. They get paid. It's like a regular job in UAE as a migrant worker.
Well,
But I don't know. And Bahrain also, they also abolished the kafil system. They have abolished it, and there are governments also who are trying to protect their own people when they go to countries like Qatar. Like Philippines, they have come up with a treaty with Qatar on how exactly their citizens are going to get paid or treated in that country. So the countries also have to do something about this, for their citizens who are going across the globe to work for someone, a stranger, completely stranger. So yeah, that's what I have for this whole topic.
well, let's hit Landon first and then go Dabber. We'll switch them up this time. Landon, what do you think about Qatar and that whole situation?
Well, the situation, the problem is FIFA. FIFA amazingly is more corrupt than an Olympic organization. FIFA needs to be treated as a criminal organization, not as an organization we're not involved with. I support football. I'm not talking, or Americans soccer, right? And I would say support your local football club, support your regional football things. But FIFA is a corrupt organization that aids and abets the worst governments and the worst things of humanity. I would like to see countries passing laws making it illegal for the country to sponsor a FIFA or event. I'd like to have heavily tax any company that sponsors FIFA, right? I want FIFA as an organization to go away. And until we do that, the corruption that is FIFA, the people who are run FIFA and all this stuff is going to continue. And we're going to see FIFA showing up in more and more workplaces. I have no, who knows, maybe FIFA will at some point show up in North Korea to try to say, yeah, we're going to do stuff in FIFA's going to show up in the worst places. So FIFA itself is an organization. So what I encourage you as a user to do, which is what I've been doing, is I see FIFA as a news thing, turn it off, right? I tell FIFA thing, don't tell me about FIFA. Don't watch FIFA. Don't buy into the corruption that's FIFA. Because Qatar is just one example of the horror show that's FIFA. The people that run FIFA are take bribes and other corruption stuff. Knowing full well what's happening.
Selected in the first place.
They then go and try to say, well, but we blah blah blah, we do these things and blah blah blah. The head of FIFA that sort of said, I'm Qatar. Well, F you and F your organization, and essentially make FIFA persona non grata. Do not allow them to operate in your company. Do not allow, in your country. Do not allow your country to sponsor FIFA, and instead sponsor other football organizations. Or as American,
I'd be curious to see. So I think what you're saying, Landon, is the best case scenario to have happened in Qatar, because we know that's not going to happen. But in an ideal world, what would have happened is Qatar would have paid to get FIFA there. FIFA would have shown up. Qatar would have put a bunch of people into basically slave camps, worked them to the bone, built their shit. The FIFA ball would have dropped, whistle would have blown to start the game, and nobody would have been in any of the stands, and nobody would have showed up to pay for any money into staying there, or any flights, or any food. Nothing. Nobody goes.
Yeah. And put out arrest warrants for FIFA board members as being, in U.S. you charge them under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and put 100% tax on the money that corporations do to sponsor FIFA, and to have 100% tax on advertisements for companies, media companies that show FIFA events. And essentially drive FIFA into the ground. On the other hand, soccer, regional and local soccer organizations should be promoted.
All that tax money that you're taking from FIFA and FIFA products goes straight into local regional areas.
As a user, I would employ those that are watching this thing. Do not watch FIFA events. Do not listen to FIFA World Cup news articles. Say, because and teach FIFA a lesson. Understand that being anti-FIFA does not mean you're anti-football. Or Americans call it soccer. Yeah. It means you do not support it. Because guess what? You think Qatar is bad? The amount of bribery is coming in to show some of the future venues of FIFA makes Qatar just a little cakewalk in comparison.
It sounds to me like what you're suggesting is supporting FIFA is the opposite of supporting football.
Yes, and for FIFA is the opposite of supporting human rights, and supporting FIFA is the opposite of being decent, right? I would instead, if the head of FIFA showed up in the U.S., I would advocate that person be arrested and tried under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
I think that's actually an interesting thing to advocate. I didn't consider that. That's actually an avenue that I didn't.
Now, the thing about Qatar is, let's say FIFA were to pretend to be concerned about people, and they force Qatar to pay the workers and so forth, and so that eats into some of the profits. Well, what they would do is they charge the advertisers even more money to allow the graft and corruption to come through, right? They can't scam it off of the thing. That won't change what Qatar is, right? If FIFA came in and pretended to make Qatar be nice to humans, that wouldn't have changed the fundamental thing about Qatar. Qatar would still be themselves. They just pretend, much like the Olympic Committee allowed Xi Jinping to put on Olympics on the CCP. By the way, Emperor Winnie the Pooh got to the high status because he was the lead of China's Olympic Committee.
Oh, good job, Olympics!
You want to hold the Olympic Committee for responsible for the rise of Xi Jinping. But Qatar, is an example of stuff of FIFA, which is higher in the set. So I like in ways some of the regional stuff and local stuff of local football clubs, American called soccer. But FIFA itself is an organization that needs to be turned into the pariah they do. The board of directors need to be exposed for the corrupt SOBs that they are. And again, wait until you see the next venues that the FIFA is going for, because the worst of the worst understand that they can play the game, bribe the FIFA people, and produce a show that's disgusting. So please, you see FIFA, turn it off. You see a news thing about FIFA, turn it off. You see advertising, turn it off. That's what you can do best, because you can't stop FIFA at Qatar. You can make it less profitable for the next hellhole that FIFA pushes into. And yes, the head of FIFA, your behavior is disgusting.
So Landon's take is burn FIFA to the ground, and sabotage things, and commit acts of terrorism. I'm kidding. He's not saying that.
No. legally make the organization. I do not support terrorism. I don't support blowing up. I don't even support blowing up Russian pipelines. Just make it not profitable.
It just sounded like it.
The best way to get people to change their minds and get corporations to change their minds is to vote with your wallet. Dapper, what do you think?
So I don't think I have anything to add about FIFA. I think Landon covered that quite effectively. But I think one of the things to keep in mind is that while this has shown a light on labor practices in Qatar, I don't think we should ignore the fact that throughout the Middle East and the wider places like North Africa and depending on exactly how you're defining the Middle East, but broadly places where there's a big, basically the effect of Arab cultural hegemony is being felt, labor practices throughout that area are extremely, extremely bad. And in fact, there are places where slavery is still being openly practiced. Like if you go to Mauritania, it's not hard to find slave markets. And so while the so while the kafala system is perhaps on the wane, we've seen a few Gulf countries kind of get rid of it and replace it with what I wouldn't call great systems, but systems that are slightly less horribly shitty. Yeah, well, slightly less horrible. I think that's one of the things is we like to tell ourselves that things like slavery is a thing of the past. And that's because technically there aren't any countries where it's officially legal to own someone. But here's the thing.
They don't use the slavery label.
Right. Yeah. To me, to tell whether or not the thing you're doing is slavery is to say this. Are the people who are doing the work allowed to stop doing it with any repercussions beyond simply no longer being provided with whatever benefits they were being provided? So, for instance, if they quit,
are they allowed to unionize and organize and withhold their labor if they don't think they're getting a fair treatment?
I actually think being unable to unionize is not good, but I think it's actually on its own not quite enough to be slavery.
Unions are still not allowed in Qatar.
So for me, if you quit this quote unquote job, right? Does your allegedly former boss get to do things like hunt you down or keep you captive in a foreign country where you don't have rights? If the answer is yes, then what is going on there is slavery, whether or not you have like a deed with this person's name on it as your property. I don't care about that. The point of slavery is
Yeah.
that it is a coercive, involuntary system.
Yeah.
So, for instance,
Mhm. It's not about
prison labor in the United
semantics.
States,
Yeah.
prison labor in the United States is a form of slavery. I don't care that no
Yes.
one has a deed to that prisoner's name. Now, you can argue whether or not prison labor should therefore be abolished, and I generally think the answer is probably. But I've heard arguments that say that, like, well, in exchange for these crimes where they took away other people's rights, we're temporarily taking away rights. I don't want to have that conversation, but I understand that it can happen.
No.
However, I don't see a good. No, I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm just saying I understand that there's a conversation. I don't currently want to have it.
Yeah.
But I don't think
Yeah.
there's a conversation to say that systems that trapped people in foreign countries under conditions where suicide becomes one of the top causes of death.
Or
I don't think there's an
the
argument for
employees
them.
have to resort to killing their employers to get out of.
Are we
Right.
working our way back to China? Hey, Apple.
But yeah,
Maybe put pressure, like Landon was saying, on companies that take advantage
Yeah.
of places
Apple.
like China,
But-
like Apple.
Yeah. Because if workers can't organize and say, "Hey, we're being mistreated.
Mhm.
We want that to stop." That's a
Mhm.
sign. That's a sort of indirect sign of slavery, right? Because if you have a situation where there's effectively only one company or one oligarchy set of companies that run the jobs, most of the jobs, and you're forced to work for one of those sucky companies, and you have no recourse when they abuse you, you're in essentially indirect slavery. It's not called slavery, but effectively it is. You live in a company town where the only ability is to work for the company or work for a company that's beholden to the company. You're in a situation where your rights as a human being are curtailed and set aside with the set of stuff. Worse, if you're in a situation where there's allegedly a labor union, but labor union is corrupt, you're also suffer.
Mhm.
My question is
But-
around like, yeah, they have made these modifications. Okay, the employers can't confiscate passports; they will be fined, or they can't keep someone against their will. They have abolished like the certificate needed to leave from the employer to leave the country. But how are you holding the employers responsible? Because Amnesty International is still like reporting from the ground. That some employers, what they do is they let the resident permit expire. They don't renew
Yeah.
it. So and the
Yep.
person is now in a vulnerable position where they can't get healthcare, and they are risking deportation. So that is
And
also
people
another
that
way
go
to
on
coerce and control
international
people.
are
Mhm.
not allowed to be in the area of FIFA organizations because they don't want them to report on the conditions
Yes.
there.
I also urge the governments around the world, like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Philippines. Yes, your people are going to those countries, and Nepal, including Nepal. A majority of people go from these countries to that country. Um, your citizens are going to that country and working there. It is your responsibility to make sure that they're treated well in that country. Also, it's not like, yeah, this is a baby, now I've handed over to you. It's now your responsibility. You
Yep.
have
And
to. The governments have to work, set up legislations, whatever, treaties, whatever, and protect your citizens in foreign countries. It's very essential. Have you seen how USA does? Someone is in foreign, they will get that person extradited, like Sam from FTX, but they were like, yeah, he's our property. We are gonna do shit whatever we want to do with it.
yeah,
So that
yeah.
so yeah, that's me.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's so things like organizations like UN should start to investigate the abuse of workers that work on FIFA organizations, whether it be again, if you go back to the list of FIFA venues, you find the same pattern of abuse over and over again. You need to take FIFA board members, treat them as members of criminal organizations, and arrest them and extradite them to countries that where there are problems. Like, for example, India certainly has a claim against FIFA because a lot of Indian citizens were tricked into going to the FIFA organization within Qatar and are abused and then are chucked out once set. So as well as you need to have, you talk about refugees. I mean, literally every time you have this FIFA event for 4 years, you have a bunch of refugees of people that have been suckered into going there and not being paid properly and then chucked out on their ear to become essentially refugees.
That's what I was
treat
talking about.
FIFA as a criminal organization it is. Treat the members, because I pretty much guarantee you, if you are a FIFA executive board member, you are making lots of money on bribes and corruption.
Oh yeah.
FIFA is a corrupt organization of the highest order. So you as a person listening to me right now, please, when you see a FIFA event, turn it off. When you see a news event about FIFA, turn it off. If you have an event to say someone tried to give you a FIFA or a World Cup sponsored news organization, go back and say, no, I don't want to see that stuff. And then you say a company that brags as being a World Cup sponsor, tell the company that's not cool. You are supporting abuse of people.
Yeah. Because
instead, put that money towards your local football club and organizations.
More people suckered in. Right? Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's in the end I would just say, like, the government should be responsible for their citizens also, please. And it would have been better if in this World Cup, people who were protesting against this didn't turn up to watch it in Qatar.
Yep.
Just saying, it would have been good, but they still turned up and watched it, even though they knew their rights might be curtailed there. They still thought it was a good risk to go and watch
worth
FIFA. What the fuck?
So I think we're gonna start wrapping it up there. We are past the 2 hour. We got so close, but we covered a lot. So I want to thank our panel members for coming. So thank you very much, Dapper. Where can people find you?
You can find me on the channel Dapper Dinosaur. It's probably tagged somewhere around here. I don't know. I didn't do the description for this video. Although I could just make sure it has a link to my channel. Because
there's a link below. There's stuff linked below.
Okay.
Everything's linked.
So I have my next show is on Tuesday. I'm going to be hanging out with Maddie from Science Side Up. We're going to be talking about Matt Powell. So bring your alcohol, because holy crap, Matt Powell. You definitely need some booze for that. Then I have the first episode of a series coming out on Thursday, in which I take a look at a talk given by the late David Menton at Answers in Genesis. This was actually, interestingly, a talk that Aaron Ra and Darren Neisch, who's an actual vertebrate paleontologist, they covered this talk a while back. But then I started getting numerous requests from me specifically to cover it. And at first I was saying, well, I was in the live chat, so you can just read my live chat, because I debunked the whole thing in real time as it was happening. But still, even that wasn't enough. So I eventually did make it into a series. And then on Saturday, I should have, like this Saturday, I already did a show. We talked about the Grand Canyon and geology and statues, because for some reason, the person who I was responding to was very, very, very affected by the existence of a Darwin statue in a museum.
Oh.
That was a big deal. Yeah. He didn't like it.
Not surprised.
But we're probably on Saturday going to be doing a continuation of that. So yeah. And also, I don't actually have any plans to slow down or stop for holidays or New Year's or anything. So you can expect that this channel is planning to continue to do 3 videos a week right through into January.
All right. Landon, where are you at? Where can people find you? And how you doing?
Well, I am on Mastodon, at landonol@mastodon.org, and I put in the chat, our local private chat, the string if you could,
Yeah.
somebody could go in and
I got you.
post that into the set. So that's where I am in terms of Mastodon stuff, because I'm no longer on Twitter. I'm still working with my producer Dave McGinnis on getting our favorite universe stuff going. But in the meantime, I would encourage you to support, for example, this fine individual, Dapper, be considered to become a member or a patron of his thing, because he puts a lot of effort into really good quality programs, educational stuff. So support him. Also, these individuals here that do a lot of stuff from like this Tavern to other cool things to wacky things, to consider becoming a member and patron of Chesh and Maanyaa, because I find I'm on both sets. And also, Our Favorite Universe has a Discord channel where you have news feeds, you have things relating to science and education and so forth. And on Chesh's channel, there's a hashtag food thing under Discord where sometimes I go and do food stuff. Like yesterday, I was on there and I had essentially a group effort to guide me in making actual pizza from scratch. And it was a fun thing. And
I was there.
thank you very much as well. So that's where you can find me, as well as you can find me in Our Favorite Universe. So
Maanyaa, how are you doing, and what do you have to say about everything?
This was a very good Unnamed Tavern, and I hope in future we can have similar ones. You can find me lurking around in Chesh's Discord, or doing Dumpfect Friday with her, or on Twitter screaming into oblivion, dense motherfucker, all the time. Yeah, and apart from that, hopefully around this Christmas and New Year, I'll be able to move into my new house that I've got the lease for. And it will be a huge difference for me, because before I had to get a 40-minute head start to reach my work. Now it will be just 5 minutes. So it's an improvement, I guess. So hopefully that move is successful before I get lobbed into India, where I have to attend some ceremonies. So looking forward to that. But that's me.
Maanyaa, are you
best wishes
getting married?
on those ceremonies, and best wishes
Thank you.
on handling your elders who seem to be procrastinators on one side, but promoted on the other side. It is. Weddings in India are amazing spectacles. They're awesome stuff. I've had a chance of having it once.
And then there's social pressure too at the same time. It's like a rice cooker waiting to just like go.
So give Maanyaa a little bit of slack, because as the eldest, she's required to do certain things. She feels bad about certain things and such. So I give her a little bit of slack if she feels under the pressure of stuff. Meanwhile, she's off booping neutron stars and going to volcanoes and other things like that.
Rescuing the Siberian tiger. I've been Chesh. Thank you so much for joining us for this Unnamed Tavern. I've enjoyed everybody's input here. I've enjoyed the side chat. Has been fantastic today. Please leave us a comment if you have something that you want to say to any of us, or please leave us a comment if there's anything you want us to cover next time. We'll be scheduling that in the background, and I believe there will be at least one change out for who's going to be here, because Maanyaa will be away. I have some fun stuff and a couple fun guests lined up for while Maanyaa is away from Dumpfect Friday. So please join us for that. I will be over on the Free Thought Profits channel on Sunday evening. So please join me over there on Sunday. It's going to be a dumpster fire. So if you're interested in a dumpster fire and a complete takeout out of what is, in my opinion now, a scam organization, the Atheist Alliance International, and exactly why and how they're a bunch of pieces of shit, you can join me over there. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. We will see you all next time. And you know what? The world has a lot of news, and some of it's bad, but it'll be okay.
Some is fun and some is good.
All is well.
And follow those people and follow those people.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.